everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I really hope you're all doing okay and having a great day and amazing week. My name is Effie and today I am talking you through all of my eyeshadow palettes. And the reason I'm doing this is because I normally do my declutters in the middle of the year, but I think this year I'm going to leave it till December. So I wanted to start the year by showing you all the palettes I have in my collection before I add anything new in. And if you want to see a video on any of them, if you want to know my thoughts on any of them, if you want to ask questions about any of them, you can do in the comments down below. So it's literally just going to be me running through all of my palettes. I did do a super quick version of this over on my TikTok where I literally just point to the palette and tell you the name of it. But today I have all of my palettes. I'm going to open them all up for you. I will attempt to swatch as much as possible. I've even taken my watch off to try and do some swatches, but there are a lot of palettes. So if this is a long video, I truly apologise. But I just wanted you guys to know what I have, and if you want to see anything, you can ask me to show you it. And yeah, and then at the end of the year, I'll do my declutters and probably get rid of some of them. But for right now, they're all staying. This isn't a declutter, I apologise if that's what you're looking for, but this is not it. It is just an eyeshadow palette collection. If you would like to see me do a collection video for the rest of my makeup, which is all here behind me, please let me know. I'll be happy to film that for you. It'll just be another long video, but that's fine. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you like my content, please consider subscribing. I put up 2 videos a week and it's always makeup content. So if that sounds like fun to you, then this is the place for you. Sorry, I keep messing up my intros and outros, I can't help it. Also, everything on my face will be listed down in the description box in case you are interested. This look was filmed for Instagram, so if you want to see that, please head over onto my Instagram. It's just at effys.place. It will be also in the description box in case you are interested. But yeah, let's get on with it, because I have a lot of talking to do. I apologise in advance. First up, we have the Be Perfect Stacey Marie Carnival 4, the Antidote palette. This is one of my favourite palettes, particularly for autumn. For swatching, I'm going to do 1 matte and 1 shimmer from every palette, and that's it, because otherwise we'll be here forever. This palette has like a pink section, a neutral section and a green section. So 1 matte, we will go for Sweet Cheeks, and 1 shimmer we will go for Nectar. There we go. Looks stunning. There we go. Those are the swatches. I can't promise that my swatches are going to be good throughout this video, but I will do my best, and hopefully it's better than me not swatching at all. Next up, we have the Carnival 3 in collaboration with Stacey Marie. This is the Love Tahiti palette. This one I don't enjoy as much. It's a lot more bright, which you would think I would enjoy. Also, the mirror came smashed, but I'm not too bothered by that. We'll do 1 matte and 1 shimmer. We'll go for Pink Lily and Blue Moon. There are the swatches. The mattes in this palette feel a little bit more dry, and the shimmers aren't my favourite. They just don't work amazingly with a brush. However, I do like this palette, I just prefer the Carnival 4. Then we have the dupe of that palette. This is the W7 Mardi Gras Express Yourself palette. It looks exactly the same. I will say it's not exactly the same. The mattes sometimes come out a little bit different. We are swatching Riviera and Volto. Beautiful. This palette still works really well in its own right. It is a good palette. As you can see, that matte is stunning and the shimmer is shimmering. So the palette does work really well. I did do a video comparing both of these. It's back on my channel if you want to watch it. I compared the 2 against each other, and the looks did come out very different, but I specifically chose shades that I thought would come out different. Another W7 palette, this is the Cool Down palette. They did very kindly send this to me. They sent me a PR box quite a while ago, and then I've heard nothing from them since. Maybe they will get back in contact with me eventually. But this is a really nice palette. I've only used it a handful of times, but I personally love cool tone browns. So for me, this is a dream palette. Again, it works really nice, good quality. W7 actually have some decent quality products. I have done a full face testing their products and I did quite like them. This is no exception. It's a really nice palette. If you are into your cool tone browns, this is a good one. Next up, we have the Revolution X Makeup by Tammy. Sorry, couldn't get my words out. This was her 3rd collaboration with Makeup Revolution. I have hit pan on this shade here, so I did love this. I did also used to have her 1st collab and her 2nd collab, but I decluttered both of them purely just because they were getting a bit old. There's 2 things I don't like about this palette. Number 1, it has 3 glitters. Not a big glitter fan. They are stunning, they look very pretty, I just don't use them. And the second thing I don't like is the shimmers are pretty much all this like putty formula that I don't love. And yeah, it just, for me, they're just not a formula that I really get on with, because you kind of have to use your finger. They don't really work very well with a brush, and I personally don't like using my fingers to do my eyeshadow. This monstrosity, I'm joking, I actually really like the palette, it's just very bulky. This is the P. Louise Watch the Queen Conquer palette. It has a pink and purple side, which I will do one matte and one shimmer from. We have Positions and Elevate. Super stunning, really, really pigmented. So that's the pink and purple side, and then you flip it over and you've got a red and yellow side. And I actually really quite like this palette, I genuinely do. I use it fairly often. Again, the mirror came broken on the red and yellow side, but that's not a big deal to me. The one thing I dislike about this palette is how bulky it is. It is absolutely huge, but as you can see, the shades are really stunning. I like her shimmer formula, I like her matte formula. I just like the palette, it's really nice. I like that you've got the two different colour schemes. I do use both sides pretty equally. Next up, we have the Kaleidoscopic Dreams palette. This was a collaboration between Makeup Obsession and Tiffany, whose Instagram handle is Illuminati. This is a rainbow palette. It is one of the palettes I'm trying to use up this year. I do really love it. The best shimmer is this silver shade. It's the best silver I've ever tried. And then for a matte shade, we'll go for a yellow. Why not? I do really like this palette. I don't know if you can still get it. Look at that silver shade. Look at it. That's the best silver ever. I don't know if you can still get this palette, but it is absolutely amazing. I am trying to use this palette up a little bit more this year. I do like the shades in here. I like that you've got a big pan for the black matte. These four shimmers in the corners are all topper shades, which is really unique and interesting. We have the Made by Mitchell Where the Mangoes palette. I tested this on my channel at the end of last year, and I wasn't in love with it, to be honest. It wasn't amazing. The mattes feel quite dry. The shimmers, there's only 3 of them, which I didn't particularly love. The shimmers are good. Like, that is gorgeous. But yeah, it's just not what I was expecting. I do have another Mitchell palette somewhere, and I much prefer the other one. I like the colour scheme. I think the colours that he's chosen for this palette are very unique. Like this like cyan shade and like these green shades are quite unique, and the fuchsia shade is really nice. And I do really like the colours. I just don't think the formula is that good. Now we move on to my 42 pan Beauty Bay collection. I do have quite a few of them. This is the Berries palette. It looks like this. I do quite like this palette. I had the 16 pan version because when they first launched the Earthy, the Midnight and the Berries palette, they didn't have a 42 pan version of the berries. So I bought the 16 pan version, and then when this came out, I bought this and decluttered the 16 pan. And I don't regret that decision. I quite like this palette. I do wear pinks quite a lot. I will say the purples don't get used loads, but that doesn't really bother me. I do wear pinks quite a lot. I do use this palette fairly regularly for work and things like that. Next up is the Bright 2.0 palette, and yes, I do keep these palettes in alphabetical order on my shelf because that's what I'm like as a person. So this palette is fairly new. I only tested it at the end of last year again, but I do truly love it. I like the Bright Matte palette, which I have, which is the next one that I'm going to show you. But I think this one, first of all, it has shimmers, which makes it very different, but also it sort of focuses on different colours. Like, for example, the Beauty Bay Bright Matte palette, it has a lot more pinks than this. It doesn't have as many purples, it has more blues, it doesn't have as many greens, it doesn't have as many browns. So this is sort of a really good counterpart to the Bright Matte palette because they focus on different colours, even though they're both rainbow palettes. Don't know why I'm putting that in quotation marks. Sorry, there are the swatches, can't remember if I showed you. Don't know why I'm putting it in quotation marks, but they do focus on different parts of the rainbow. Like, they have all the colours, but they're just different. And then this one is the Bright Matte, and hopefully you're going to see what I mean. This one has a lot more pinks. The pinks are also very different. It doesn't have that many greens. Obviously, it doesn't have any shimmers in it. It has a lot more purples. You know, it sort of focuses on different colours. Obviously, I can't swatch a matte and a shimmer, so I'll just do 2 mattes. Obviously. We will go for this green here because I love green, and we'll go for the yellow as well. I actually truly do love this palette. I didn't remove the other swatches, but there we go. That green looks a bit powdery. That's better. I do truly love this palette. I've had it for a while. I have one pan in it right there. Tiny little pan. I would love to see more pan in this palette. I do use it fairly often. I use the browns a fair amount, to be fair, because if I just want like 1 or 2 browns through my crease for work, I'll just come to this palette because it was sat on my desk for a very long time. Next up is the Earthy palette. I love this palette. It's sort of like a version of the Wilderness palette, so I love it. I love green eyeshadows. I do use this palette a fair amount. There are some hefty dents in some of the shades. I will say this, compared to the Wilderness palette, there are a few shades that are duplicates, like Lime is a duplicate and so is Moss and so is Ray. I don't mind that. I do love this palette. I'm a big fan of green eyeshadows. That pan, sorry, has quite a hefty dent, so does this one. I reckon I could see a few. That is a stunning shimmer. I don't think I've ever used that shimmer, but I'm going to. Jeez. That was Kava? Oh no, that one also looks stunning. I think it's the lights. Under these lights, everything looks beautiful and glittery. I love it. But yeah, this is a really good palette. I personally love green eyeshadows, so it gets a decent amount of use from me. Next up is the Fiery 2.0 palette. Again, I tested this at the end of last year. I actually really like it. I never picked up the original Fiery palette, but I do enjoy using this one. I will say quite a lot of the shimmers in this palette aren't my cup of tea. I think some of the shimmers in the Earthy palette are a lot better. That gold, stunning. But a lot of these are sort of just a bit meh, and they don't really interest me. But the mattes are stunning. I like that it's got a few browns in here that I can use. I like that it's got the sort of like warmer yellows. I like those sorts of shades. Next up, Midnight palette. I promise I only have 2 more of these. So this is a purple and blue palette. Again, I really enjoy this palette. Can you tell that I like Beauty Bay eyeshadow palettes? I wouldn't have this many if I didn't, I guess. But yeah, this is stunning. It's sort of like a permanent version of the Book of Magic, I think it's called, which I don't have, but I really wish I did because these are stunning. I love the colour scheme. I do enjoy blue and purple eyeshadows. I don't use them as much as like greens and reds and browns, but I do like them. It's nice to have it as an option. This is the final 42 pan palette that I have. This is their collaboration with Jade Thirlwall from Little Mix. This might be my least favourite. I'm just looking at the pile. This might be my least favourite just because it doesn't have a specific colour scheme. And when I come to these palettes, I understand that 2 of them are rainbow palettes, but when I come to these palettes, I know that I'm going for blue or red or green or whatever. This is a bit different. I do like the fact you've got the warm tones and the cool tones, and actually I do really like some of the warm toned shimmers and some of the cool tone mattes. They do look stunning. It works nicely. It's got the Beauty Bay formula, of course it does. I just don't reach for this as much because in my mind it doesn't have a clear colour scheme. So if I'm like, oh, I really want to do an orangey red look, I don't think of this palette, I think of the Fiery palette. Next up is the Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. This was a gift from a friend. I honestly don't know why I keep it in the box. I just do. I actually really like this palette. I've only used it a handful of times because Jeffree Star was cancelled for a long time and now I have no idea whether or not I can talk about him on my channel. So to stay safe, I generally choose not to. But I do like this palette. It is very nice. I find it difficult to create looks using it because it just doesn't have a cohesive colour scheme. It's like a pastel rainbow palette. So other than doing a pastel rainbow look, I struggle to think of what to do with it. My arm is getting quite sore at this point, but I'm carrying on. Next up is the Dew Colour Tropical palette. This was very kindly sent to me and it is what I have on my eyes right now. I filmed this look for Instagram, so if you're interested, head over there and you will see it. Let's go for a matte and a shimmer. I will say this kind of reminds me of the BH Cosmetics Ticket to Brazil palette, which I decluttered a very long time ago. It does kind of feel like kids makeup. However, it performs quite well. These bigger pans, I did do a video testing this palette. These bigger pans, not a fan of. I think they are useless and they should get rid of them. But the rest of the palette, the eyeshadows, I actually think are fine. The shimmers are nothing special at all. They are just standard. You can't even tell which one on my arm is the shimmer. That's what I mean. They're kind of boring. On my eyes, I have put a liquid glitter on top of it, but the mattes work fine, and the shimmers actually have quite a lot of pigment to them. So for example, my cut crease, I filled it in with this shade and then went over the top with the glitter, but it does a really good job of filling in. It's just not very glittery. This is the XXRevolution Vortex palette. It's got like velvet, and somehow I've managed to keep it pretty clean, which is an achievement for me. I don't reach for this too often. I like it. However, I don't like the pink and the orange. Get rid of them. Give me more blues. I will also say there isn't really a dark matte blue. This is like a green shade. That's a shimmer. That's black. That's grey. I wish there were more blues. Like, this is meant to be a blue palette. The packaging is blue. It's meant to be blue. Give me blues. I also don't particularly love that there's like a gold. This one I don't mind, it's fine, but I don't love the fact that there's a gold. There is also a silver and a grey. I should be swatching instead of rambling. Don't know why I chose those two fingers, maybe because that one's stained. They are nice. It's a nice palette, it works really well. I would be tempted to pick up another one of these if it came in a colour scheme that I liked. But yeah, I just sort of wish there were more blues. Next up is the Unicorn Cosmetics Angel palette. Again, I've done a full video on this. I found that the shimmers aren't the best. They work fine, but there's something off about the formula such that you kind of get hard pan. Like, all of these like split pans in the middle, they're all half shimmer, half matte. And all of them have sort of got this weird hard pan over them, which makes it really hard to get the shimmer onto a brush and then onto your eye. You can get around it, you just have to sort of dig at the shade a little bit to sort of loosen it up and turn it into almost like a powder, and then you can get it on your brush and it's fine. But it is a pain. Next up is the Charlie Betty Beauty The Earth palette. This was very kindly sent to me by Charlie Betty Beauty. I have a relatively good relationship with the owner of the brand. I really like her, she's lovely. And she was actually, I think, the first ever eyeshadow palette that I received in PR. So I do appreciate it. I love this palette. I don't use it all the time. Again, I have a full video testing it. That is stunning. Love it. Also, that shade, the shimmer that I swatched, is called Capricorn, and I am a Capricorn, so I love that. And it's an absolutely gorgeous shade. Yeah, I do love this palette. I should use it more because it has like the browns for every day and greens, which I wear all the time. For some reason, I just don't reach for it, but this is a lovely, lovely palette. I also have her lashes on today in the style Terra, which again were very kindly sent to me, and I love them. This is the Made by Mitchell Head in the Clouds palette. This was the other palette I was talking about that I have by Made by Mitchell, and I prefer this palette. First of all, it has more shimmers in it, which is a really big help, but also I just think the formula is so much better. Like, it feels less dry. It actually feels nice. I have only used this palette twice maybe, but it does work really nicely. The colour scheme throws me off a little bit. Like, there's not a lot of cohesive looks I can think of with this palette, other than like boring ones like a purple smoky eye or a blue smoky eye, whatever. But I do truly love this palette. It does work really nicely, blends amazingly. You maybe have to put in a little bit more work with your blending, but I do like it. I also wish the background of the palette was like one solid colour, but that's just personal preference. The Artitude Cosmetics Colour Splash palette. This was very kindly sent to me by Artitude Cosmetics. I was on her PR list. Again, I relatively kind of have spoken to the owner of the brand. I was on the PR list. I don't know if I am anymore. I did message her and she said I was, but then she released her newest palette and I didn't get sent it. So I'm not really sure. Well, I'll figure it out. But this palette is stunning. I did actually request this when I got added onto her PR list. Don't know if it was last year or the year before. She said, is there anything in particular you want? And I said this palette because it looks stunning. It is obviously just a rainbow palette, but the shimmers work so well, and they're quite unique shimmers. Like, the two blues are quite unique. I like that she's gone for a pink shimmer instead of a red shimmer because I wouldn't really use a red shimmer. And then I like the selection of mattes because you've got different tones. Like, you've got a dark green and a light green. You've got a blue. You don't really have a dark or a light blue, but that's fine. You obviously have a black to deepen it up. I kind of wish instead of the brown it was a white, but that doesn't really bother me too much because I do have these two shades that I can use for blending out. And then the other palette I have is the Phoenix palette, again from Art2 Cosmetics. Look at the packaging. It is gorgeous. I love her packaging. And then this is the palette, and this is what it looks like. It has two duochrome shades, so this one is blue to purple and this one is green to purple. I'll put them on my hand so you can see them a bit better. Let me just wave my hand about a little bit. Can you see that green and purple and then blue and purple? Yeah, hopefully you can see that. This palette is stunning. It has quite a few different formulas in here, which I think she writes about it on the back, which is how I know that. But the shimmers are stunning, the mattes are buttery. Honestly, I think if you were to test this palette against like some high-end brands, you wouldn't be able to tell that this was not a high-end brand. Next up is the Revolution Pro new neutral palette. Again, I did a full video on this. I did a full video testing Revolution Pro and actually I quite liked a lot of the products. I don't reach for this palette loads, but it does work pretty nicely. Like, it's a pretty standard palette. I could wear it for work. It's pretty neutral. It's like neutral but a bit different. It's not just browns or pinks. It's got like purples and reds and stuff in there. The shimmers are really nice. I think this is a pressed glitter. Not interested. But it is a really nice palette, and from what I remember it wasn't too expensive, so not bad at all. The Riviera palette by ABH. I've only used this maybe twice. I don't know why. The shimmers I just don't get on with, for one, and I didn't get on with the ones in the Modern Renaissance palette. I know some people love them. I just don't. And then the mattes, the colour scheme just isn't, it doesn't fill me with like inspiration. Yeah, so I haven't used this. I keep telling myself I should give it a better try because those look great. And I probably could come up with a few looks from this palette, but I just don't. So original palette, look at the glorious amount of pans. We've got pan, 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 pan. Is it only 5? I could probably get a few more out of this to you. This is one of the first palettes that I ever bought. Obviously I did have a few more before this, but this is like the oldest palette I still have, and it still performs. It still works really nicely. I actually still really vibe with the colour scheme. The browns in particular are my type of browns, and I do truly love it. The shimmers aren't that special. I will say I do think the formula of this palette is a little bit dated, not just because the palette is old and I've had it for a long time, but also I just think if this palette was to be remade now with today's formulas, it would be better. The older sister / younger sister, I don't know, this is her second collaboration between Soph and Makeup Revolution, and this palette is also stunning. This is the other palette in the products I want to use up this year sort of thing. It still performs really, really well. Again, I find with this palette there's a really good selection of neutrals. Again, that silver is amazing. There's a really good selection of neutrals that I can get on board with. There's also more oranges, which I personally like to do. If I'm going warm, I want to go really warm and sort of do what I've done on my eyes today. But also there's some like more chilled out, relaxed shades. Like these purples, I have a top that pretty much matches those shades. I could wear them both to work. The Cosmic Brushes Royal Rose palette, I again tested this towards the end of last year, but it is gorgeous. Again, Cosmic Brushes is a UK based indie brand. They are doing so well for themselves. They constantly sell out. I do have another one of their palettes which I'll show you next, but this one is really nice. I do think that if you took out some of the shades, this would be a pretty good neutral palette. I've only used this once, but I truly do think it is really good. It's a really nice palette, and they constantly sell out. They have more than 2 palettes, and I really want to pick up some of their other ones, but they constantly sell out, so I can't. But this one's really nice. And then the second one, the Serenity palette, is also really nice. This is the main reason I ordered from them, because this palette just has my heart. I'm trying to not swatch the greens because I've swatched so many greens already. This is less of a green, it's more chartreuse. and we'll go for a gold shimmer. Stunning. The quality is amazing. Again, UK based indie brand. We love supporting indie brands. The quality is really good. The formulas are really good. I've used this palette a handful of times at this point and I do truly love it. We have the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. I have to be very careful with this palette because last time I filmed a video with it, this shade fell out of the pan. So, not impressed with that, but I do truly love this palette. The mattes, I kind of wish there was a bit more depth, but I do truly enjoy the shimmers. They are really nice, again, being very careful with the palette. And I do think it's very good quality, like the formulas are really good. And because I enjoyed this palette so much, I do want to pick up the Pretty Grunge palette from Huda. I don't know if I ever will because it's a lot of money to spend, but I truly do like this palette, and I do, for me, I got it in a glossy box advent calendar a couple of years ago and I'm very happy I have it. Kaleidos, the Escape Pod palette, this is one of my favourite palettes. The shimmers are beautiful, but I also really love the matte shades. I don't use the brights that often because I just think there's not really enough to like blend them out with. But I do truly love the shimmers, and I do use the sort of like neutrals down here at the bottom fairly regularly. And then we move on to another stack of Beauty Bay palettes, and once I've done these I will take a bit of a break because my battery is flashing at me. First up, Age of Opulence. Again, these are in alphabetical order. This is stunning, I love it. I don't get the chance to use it very often just because the colour scheme isn't like my everyday, but when I do use it, I do love it. That blue. Honestly, Beauty Bay, stunning. I want to throw up. Beauty Bay is on another level when it comes to these palettes. I do think these £20 palettes are some of the best quality ones you can get. You can't get this one anymore. All of these palettes are limited edition, annoyingly. But yeah, I truly do love them. This is one of my favourites, maybe in my top 3, maybe my second favourite. Dark Fantasy. This one is relatively newer, like I think I tested it last year. I don't love this one as much just because I wish there was a bit more variation in the colour scheme, because I feel like there's quite a few shades in here that I can't really work with because there's nothing to blend them out with, like the dark blue, the purple, the dark red. I don't know what I meant to do with those. There's no blending out shades really. The Love Notes, I tested this one again at the end of last year. There is a video on it. I did not enjoy this palette. This is my least favourite. Of the 6 I have, yeah, this is definitely my least favourite. I just think that there's too many pale shades that don't really do a lot. So I think it would benefit if like this shade, these 2 shades and this shade were just a touch darker to make them more of like a mid-tone instead of pastels everywhere, because I have pretty pale skin and I can barely see these shades on my skin tone. So I imagine this palette doesn't work great for people with darker skin tones. New Mood palette. I actually quite like this. I've only used it twice, I think, but I do truly love it. This shade here, stunning. It's almost duochrome. It's got like a pink to green shift. I truly do love that. And yeah, I actually really do enjoy this palette. I'm trying to make sure I can swatch all of them together, and I've only got 2 more after this, so I reckon they'll fit. This is so nice. I haven't had this that long. I only tested it last year, but I do like it. Again, formula is amazing. The shimmers are amazing. Again, the colour scheme throws me off a little. I think this one is slightly better than the Dark Fantasy because it does have blending out shades, but it's almost like trying to make a cohesive look out of it is a little bit difficult. However, I will say it has this shade here and this shade here, which look like 2 whites. They're both shimmer shades. This one has a pink shift, this one has a blue shift. I love that. That is genius. I think that's such a good idea. Sunset Horizons. This is the first one I ever got, and I actually won it in a giveaway, not from Beauty Bay, from some random person on Instagram. But this is what made me fall in love. I will say in this palette, quite a lot of the shades are that like putty formula that I dislike, but I can get them to work, and I've done so many looks with this palette that I love, and I kind of wish I'd hit pan on some stuff, but I'm sure I will eventually. That gold, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I do truly love this palette. I've used it a lot. Like, there's some heavy dents in some of the shades. I just need to power through and hit pan on something. And my favourite of the 6, the Wilderness palette. If you've watched my channel for longer than 2 minutes, you will know that I love this palette. I've hit pan on 1, 2, 3, 4 shades. This one's very close, so is this one. Yeah, I truly do really enjoy this palette. I've swatched like 2 shades that I never use, but I truly do love this palette. I do use it fairly often. If somebody were to say what's your favourite palette, I would probably pick this one. We are back. Battery is charged up a little bit more. I honestly do not have that many more palettes to go through, so let's carry on with it. I did film a TikTok while I was gone and I swatched all of my blushes, and now I have so many swatches all over me. So let's just try and get this done. We have the Huda Beauty Emerald Obsessions. This, there we go, is a pretty standard palette. I do enjoy it. I don't reach for it that often. I think just because when I think of using greens, I reach for a bigger palette, but that shimmer shade is gorgeous. The mattes work really well. I'm not a big fan of this khaki shade. I wish it wasn't there. I wish it was a different green. That matte, that shimmer, and that shimmer are really interesting. The other 3 don't interest me at all. It's a very hit or miss palette. I know she doesn't make these anymore. She does have different Obsession palettes, like she has the brown ones, I don't know. But yeah, I like this, but not loads. Colourpop High Tide palette. This is my only Colourpop palette. I really like it. It's sort of similar to that Emerald palette. The shimmers, meh, not that good. They're not my favourite. They kind of don't do a lot. If I were to use this palette, I would prefer to pick a shimmer from somewhere else. But this is a nice enough palette. The mattes are really pigmented. It has one of these sort of like matte shades with glitter in it that I usually don't see the point in. But it's a nice enough palette and it was pretty cheap, and I definitely want to test more from Colourpop. The NYX Ultimate Shadow palette. This is in the style Festival. This was very kindly sent to me by NYX quite a while ago, last year sometime I think. I like this palette. I think it's really pretty. And the mattes work really well, the shimmers work really well. It's just a really nice palette. It's definitely more summery, but it does work really well, really good quality. I can't remember how much these cost because again, like I said, it was sent to me. But it's pretty good. Depending on how much they cost, I would say go for it. Be Perfect Summer in Saint-Tropez palette. This is so old. It doesn't even come in this packaging anymore. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pans in it. I honestly love this palette. The mattes are a bit hit and miss. Some of them are really nice and buttery. Some of them are a bit chalky. But the shimmers are gorgeous. Honestly, this palette has some of the best shimmers I've ever tried. And I think that all brands should create shimmers like this. It's a really nice palette. I really enjoy it. Obviously, I've got quite a lot of use out of it. This was a gift from a friend for my birthday, like honestly 5 years ago. But I truly do love it. I would love to see some more pan in this palette. I reckon I can hit pan on some of the shimmers, so maybe I should make that a challenge for this year. The Rude Cosmetics, the lingerie collection, Wild Nights. I should say, if I look slightly different, I took my lashes off because they were no longer sticking down very well. So yeah, if you noticed anything different, that's it. This is a fully matte palette. Again, I'll just swatch 2 random shades. My fingers are getting stained as well. We will go for the blue and the brown. I actually quite like this palette. I think for a fully matte palette, it does have a lot of pigment. They blend really nicely. Rude Cosmetics is a really good brand. I don't talk about them enough, but I have done 2 testing videos of their brand, and honestly, they have some really good quality products. The Doll Beauty I Heart Doll palette. Again, this is a fully matte palette. I didn't realise I had that many fully matte palettes, but apparently I do. I've only used this a handful of times, but it is pretty good quality. I mean, the mattes feel really nice. They're really pigmented. I like that you've sort of got a selection of pinks and a selection of browns. And you've also got some like blush browns and like this purple. I think even though this is a 9-pan fully matte palette, you could make so many different looks out of this by just pulling shimmers from different palettes. It's really good. The Lois Cosmetics Gone Rogue palette. This is stunning. I don't know what's happened to Lois Cosmetics, but she makes some really good palettes. The golds, if there is a gold in one of her palettes, it's an amazing shade, trust me. The mattes are really creamy. This was one of the first palettes she ever came out with, and I love it. Look at that gold. Look at it. Stunning. If there's, like I said, if there's a gold in one of her palettes, it's going to be gorgeous. But yeah, I don't really know what's going on with the brand, but the palettes are really good. This is a pressed glitter. I have no interest in it, but I created a look for this when I tested it on my channel, and I adore the look I came up with. Honestly, it's one of my best looks I've ever done. And it came from this palette, so I really like it, but I don't use it that often, and I should use it more. Then we have the Lotus Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld palette. Again, another stunning palette. I don't like the mattes in this as well. The gold, again, stunning gold shade, but the mattes just don't do it for me. I like the colours, but I just don't think I love the formula. They don't blend that well in my opinion, and I just struggle with it. I just struggle with this palette, but it is still really good quality. I don't know whether it's me or something I'm doing. I don't reach for that often, but I do keep it because the shimmers are truly stunning, and I will grab this palette to pull a shimmer if I've done a matte look using a different palette. Another Rude Cosmetics palette. This is the Roaring 20s Reckless palette. I picked this up because I saw Soph test it and she loved it and I love it. I don't reach for that often. Some of the shimmers are a bit boring, like these three here are a bit boring, but this one, look at that green, absolutely stunning. This one's also a bit boring, but this one's interesting, this one's interesting, this one's interesting. And then the mattes, again, super creamy, blendable, absolutely gorgeous formula. I don't reach for this that often. Look at that shimmer. I need to do a look with that shimmer. Yep, it's got like pink and green shimmer particles in it. Absolutely gorgeous. This is a stunning palette. I think this was relatively expensive, like over £20. I think, I can't quite remember, but definitely I think this is worth it. Again, I have tested this on my channel if you would like to see it. I promise we don't have that many left, and they are mostly neutral palettes. So we will start with L'Oreal I Go Wild palette. This is a really nice palette. I don't like the fact that the pans are sort of all flat. I don't know how to describe it. They just look weird and it throws me off because I think I'm going to mix shades together too much. The shimmers are fine. I don't reach for this palette loads. I just think the colour scheme is slightly off for me. I can't quite tell you why. Maybe it's the reds in there and the purple throwing me off, but for some reason I just don't reach for this that often. But it's quite nice. However, for L'Oreal, this was expensive. The Barry M Sweet Caramel palette, I actually really like this. I think it's really good quality. I wish this wasn't a red. I sort of wish it was just a brown, because I think that would work better, but this is a truly stunning palette. The shimmers are actually really nice. I really rate this. Barry M surprised me. I did a full video testing Barry M and I was genuinely surprised at how many products I enjoyed, and this was one of them. A palette that doesn't need swatching, finally. This is the Beauty Bay liner palette. This came out with their Utopia collection. I don't love this. I don't do loads of graphic liner looks. I maybe do them like 5 times a year. And I don't really like this. I like the colours. I think the colours look amazing. They just don't work very well, in my opinion. And they have quite a few of these. I think they've brought out 3 of these in total now. And I've never felt the need to buy any of the other ones. This, in my opinion, is a much better graphic liner palette. This is the Artitude Cosmetics Split It Painter's Paradise palette, and this is what it looks like. It has 8 pans, but each pan has 2 different colours in it. I quite like this. As you can see, I've used it a fair amount. I will say, mine is broken. But that's fine. I think, even though I have been sent quite a bit of PR from Artitude Cosmetics, I can't remember, but I think I bought this myself. And I do use it fairly often, and if I want to do graphic liner, I pick this palette over the Beauty Bay one. Back to swatching. The Collection Ibiza Sunsets Eye Palette. This is a super cheap, super basic 8-pan palette. The shimmers, honestly, aren't the one. But I do think the mattes are really nice, and the shimmers are fine if you just want something to go on your lid for like an everyday look. But I do actually quite like the mattes in here. I think they work very well. This was probably pretty cheap. Collection is a pretty cheap brand. They have quite a few of these, but I do like this one. Beauty Bay Pastels palette. I'm actually just going to start swatching on my other arm. The swatches will be terrible because I can't swatch with my left hand, but these fingers are so stained and my arm is hurting. So we're going to try swatching with my other hand. Beauty Bay Pastels palette. I always forget about this palette, but it is really good. Like, for pastels, they are so pigmented, and this is why I expected more from the Love Note palette, Because actually, even if I swatch the lilac in here, that is so pigmented. I mean, it's still a pastel shade, but you can see it on my skin tone, which is why I was so disappointed with the Love Notes, because you can't see those pastels. The Be Perfect Rain palette should be up on my shelf somewhere, but for some reason it wasn't. This is what it looks like. It is a collaboration between Be Perfect and Makeup by Alina. I've used this a handful of times and I actually quite liked it. I was expecting not to, which I know sounds bad, but sometimes I do go into videos having an expectation of what I'm going to think of the palette. And with this palette, I was proven so wrong. I love the look that I did. I've done a couple of looks since, and I really liked it. I think for this, it's just, there are quite a lot of dark shades, not a lot of blending out shades, and that puts me off a little bit, but I could dip into this, but I don't. But actually, this works really well. I love it. I love the browns. I love the colour scheme. I hate the packaging. I hate it. I mean, looks pretty, opens stupidly. Rude Cosmetics, once again, the United Shimmer palette. Again, I have used this in a video. I think it was my first Rude testing video. This is a fully shimmer palette. It's the only fully shimmer palette I have. And part of the reason why I love this is because it's called the United Shimmerdom palette, aka United Kingdom. And all of the shade names are like variations of different like towns and cities in the UK. So you've got like Womanchester, as in like Manchester but woman. You've got like Oxflair instead of Oxford, I guess. Edinglau instead of Edinburgh. Anyway, really cute names, love that. The shimmers aren't my favourite. Some of them are really unique and really interesting, some of them aren't. I just, again, forget about this palette. Because it is a complementary palette, I can't use this palette on its own. They look gorgeous. Under these lights, gorgeous. I can't really use this palette on its own because it's fully shimmer, and I just forget about it, but it truly is gorgeous. I'm not going to swatch these two because they only have 4 shades in each of them. Maybe I'll swatch 1 shade from each one. These are the e.l.f. Bite Size eyeshadow palettes. This is the style Berry Bad, and we'll swatch the dark brown because I actually quite like the mattes in these. The shimmers I'm not too fussed on. And this one here is Acai You, which is a blue one. And we will swatch this shimmer shade there. Yeah, see, the shimmers are just like boring in my opinion, but these palettes are good quality and they're only like £4. They're super inexpensive. They have loads of different colourways of them. And I reckon if you can find one that you like, it would work really well for just like everyday throwing in your purse, doing your makeup on the train, whatever it is you want to do with it. They are really good. I just don't reach them that often because I'm very rarely doing my makeup anywhere other than in this chair where I have a desk in front of me and everything I need. So I don't reach them that often, but they are really good value for money. W7 Romance palette, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm delirious at this point. This was very kindly sent to me by W7. It is obviously meant to be a dupe of the Soft Glam palette by ABH. I don't have that palette, so I can't comment on whether or not it is actually a dupe. But I actually think this is a good quality palette. Like, ignoring it's meant to be a dupe of an ABH palette, that's terrible swatching. Ignoring the fact it's meant to be a dupe, I think this is a really nice palette. I like the colours in it. I like the pigment, the shimmers actually work pretty well. I've used this a handful of times and I've not been disappointed by it. It's a really good everyday palette. Urban Decay Naked Cyber palette. This was a gift from a friend. I don't use this that often because I was just a little bit disappointed by it. Like, I was expecting a lot more because obviously naked palettes have such a hype around them. But yeah, I like it. I don't love it. The shimmers actually work pretty fine. There are actually some really unique shimmer shades in here. There are only 3 mattes, and that is this one, and this one. Because I think the whole point of this palette is you shove a matte through your crease and then your main focus is the lid shade. And I will say, the shimmers are nice and they are quite unique, some of them. I just don't reach for this palette. The Mad Beauty Friends palette, this was very kindly sent to me. I have done a full testing video on it if you would like to see that. Let's go for the blue and let's go for the purple. The mattes actually feel quite nice. The shimmers are a little bit dry and I just think that when I tested them, they just didn't do a lot. I was expecting more because they look stunning in the pan, like they look so glittery, but they don't do that on your face. But I do think this palette works fine. I can't remember how much this cost, but I did look it up in the video and I did say that I don't think it's worth that much money. If you are looking for a Friends palette, obviously this is a nice one to have, but then at the same time, Revolution have done a Friends collab, and probably other brands have as well, so I would maybe pick those ones up because they're a little bit cheaper. But it is a nice enough palette, it's not my favourite, and I don't think it's really worth the money, even though it was very kindly sent to me, and I do appreciate that. There's no point me lying to you about my opinion. The Wet n Wild Coffee Cat palette, I love this palette. It smells like coffee. It's my favourite neutral palette. It has some warm shades, some peachy shades, some neutral shades, and I think that's why I love it. The shimmers aren't my favourite of all time. They do a good enough job, like that looks nice, but it's not everything I want. However, it's everything I want for a work day. I had to go away for a week for work. I took this palette with me, and I think it was the only palette I took with me. Maybe I took one that was a bit more pink, just in case I wore pink. But this got me through the majority of those 5 days, and truly such a good palette. Wet n Wild is so inexpensive. I mean, look at that pigment. Absolutely stunning. And yeah, I truly do love this. If you are looking for a neutral palette that is inexpensive, I do recommend this. Lottie London, the Ibiza palette. I think I've only used this once. I hope I've used it, otherwise I just haven't used it. And I actually quite like it. The shimmers in here are really, really nice. It is quite a bright palette, so it doesn't get used loads. But Lottie London is relatively inexpensive. I can't remember how much this cost. I did buy this myself, I think, or I won it in a giveaway. But I do like it. The colour selection is really nice. I kind of wish they either had another purple in here or they didn't have the purple, because otherwise it doesn't really work in my mind with the rest of the palette. But I do think this is really nice. It's got 4 shimmers that all work really nice. The one in the middle is the best of the 4, but they all do work pretty well. And then the mattes are buttery creamy, really good. Also from Lottie London, we have the Envy Me palette. This one was very kindly sent to me by Lottie London, and I really truly do like this palette. It has greens in it, which of course I love. The mattes work really well. The shimmers aren't my favourite. I prefer the shimmers in the Ibiza palette, but I do think this has really nice matte selection. And what I'll do is I'll go in with one of the shimmers and then just top it with like a glitter or something. It doesn't bother me. The last palette. I'm dying. My voice hurts, my arms hurt. I'm very tired and I've got so much more work to do today. This is the Morphe 9T palette. This did belong to my... Squeaky. This did belong to my friend. She decluttered it and I took it off her hands. There are 3 shimmers in here, and that is this one, this one, and this one. No interest in the shimmers. In case you haven't noticed from this video, I'm very picky when it comes to shimmers. I don't love these ones. I think the mattes work fine. This is quite an old palette. Like, my friend had it for a while before she gave it to me. It works fine. Like, still got pigment to it, still works pretty well. I do use this sometimes. If I'm not using the Coffee Cat palette, I'll probably take this one, mainly for the mattes, and then I'll take like a liquid glitter to put on top. It's an alright palette. I don't know if they still sell it, probably not. I really want to test out their essential mattes because Missa raves about it. But there we go. That is all of my eyeshadow palettes. I didn't realise how many I have. I'm not going to count them up because I don't really want to know that information, to be honest, because then I won't be able to buy any more because I'll have too many. But that is all my eyeshadow palettes. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Like I said, if there's any of these palettes that you want to see me do a video on, please just let me know in the comment section. If you want to see my reviews on any of them, check back on my channel because I've probably done a video on it. Or just ask me to do a new review. I guess I can do that. I really hope you enjoyed it. Sorry that it is probably a very long video. So I'll keep this intro short. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. I put up 2 videos a week and it's always makeup content, so if that sounds like your type of thing, then this is the place for you. Please leave me a comment down below, let me know how you're doing. But other than that, I'll let you go. Have a great day, an amazing week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.